All right, hello and welcome everybody. Hope you're having a good day. First off, like always, God bless America. This is going to be a couple of videos from Fox News in high speed. Let's get right into it.
Senator Tim Scott sounding off as Joe Biden plans to allow Trump-era tax cuts to expire.
The Biden administration and Joe Biden specifically, they are willing to tank America's economy for no actual purpose. The fact that he's willing to
tank America's economy even further,
to own that and actually wants to, tells us that not only does Bidenomics not work, but Joe Biden does not understand how to create activity in the private sector.
Well, clearly he doesn't. It's only government jobs he ends up creating. Here to react, Sunday Morning Futures anchor and our friend Maria Bartiromo. Maria, what is the rationale? Is it just anti-Trump that we got to let these expire because they came from him?
Well, Pete, good morning to you. Yeah, pretty much. Anything that Trump has done is bad, according to Joe Biden. That's why he walked into the Oval Office and did, 90-plus executive orders to overturn President Trump's security at the border and all of his policies. Look, I think that this message from Joe Biden just works for the populace, and he just wants to keep using it. Tax cuts are for the rich. Tax cuts don't work. And also, you have to remember that he needs money for his climate change agenda, Pete. I mean, he wants all these new rules in business that they have to account for the emissions that their customers and their customers might be emitting. Why? That's going to create all sorts of new fees and new regulations and fees tied to those regulations so that he could generate income, generate some revenue so that he could pay for all of his agenda in terms of the climate change agenda. So it's
that's just going to give him more money. He doesn't care that America's already tanking, inflation's through the roof.
Partly, yes, if Trump did it, it's bad, according to Joe Biden, and it's partly I need more money because I have to put all these new regulations out there and rules around my climate change agenda and get everybody to drive electric vehicles. It's a two-part process there. He needs the income because he needs to pay for his climate change agenda, and he doesn't want Trump to look like he was right.
And
but you know what?
And even though it's not true, he's allowed to demagogue the rich, play the class warfare game in a way he thinks is advantageous for him. That's what it comes down to as well.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And unfortunately for him, the people are onto it because we are in an economy right now which is slowing down pretty considerably. On Thursday we got the GDP number, and it was 1.6% growth. If you look at the last couple of quarters, we are going down fast. In the third quarter of 2023, we were seeing an economy growing at 4.9%. Then the next quarter, fourth quarter, we're down to 3.2%. Now, next quarter, this is the first quarter of 2024, we're at 1.6%. And get this, of that 1.6% growth, 1.2% of it came from consumer spending on housing, healthcare, and insurance. That's all inflation. So it's very hard to see actual consumer activity rising when you've got everything rising in price. Just about everything is more expensive because of all of the reckless spending out of the Biden administration, $7 trillion in spending in 2023. So, look, he's got to do something about it. So what does he do? He chooses to demagogue, just like you said, divide and conquer, rich versus poor, heterosexual versus homosexual, right? Black versus white, whatever.
That's all he's did is create friction in our country. That's it. Divide and conquer.
Divide us all so that he can conquer.
Right.
That's the strategy. And that comes to the economic situation as well.
For sure. Amir, real quick, what do you have coming up on Sunday Morning Futures?
We got a big show. I'm calling it the split screen of 2024. On the one side, Donald Trump in a courtroom. On the other side, Joe Biden campaigning. That is going to be the split screen until the election because Biden's DAs and Biden's DOJ is having Donald Trump hold up in a courtroom. We're going to talk with Eric Trump, the executive vice president of the Trump Organization, and, of course, President Trump's son, about this week in the courtroom for President Trump, what went on there. Jim Jordan is here. He's got a new investigation at Judiciary, which is looking at how the Manhattan DA's office basically manufactured lots of these so-called crimes that we're talking about in this courtroom. So we're going to get into that investigation as well. Alan Dershowitz is here to talk about all of this anti-Semitism raging. What has President Biden said about the anti-Semitism raging across our country? We're going to get into it. Why isn't he out there more denouncing all of this? And then Michael Waltz is with us, a congressman from Florida, to talk about the world on fire, unfortunately, and also FISA. The passing of FISA, extending it for another 2 years, has some people worried about surveillance on American citizens, ordinary citizens. We're going to get into that debate as well. We've got a lot coming up. Breaking news in about 10 minutes' time. We'll cover all that.
Great show, as always. Thanks, Maria.
And here's the second clip from Fox News.
In a new Fox News op-ed, Republican lawmakers are warning that China is expanding its influence in the U.S. and attempting to fuel political instability in the region. Here to discuss this growing concern is Senator Bill Cassidy. Senator, good morning to you. A hugely important topic here. You say that China is expanding its economic reach into Latin America and the Caribbean, really our backyard. And these are areas that we have historically turned a blind eye to. You want to change this. Tell us more.
Absolutely. Since China joined the World Trade Organization, there's been a $7 trillion transfer of wealth from the American middle class to China. And some of that they've invested back in the hemisphere, but in doing so, they've corrupted public officials. They've established military bases and monitoring bases in this hemisphere. They are threatening us both economically and militarily. This has got to change.
So tell us about the Americas Act.
Yeah, the Americas Act incentivizes companies to move back to the United States. And if labor costs or environmental regulations are too much here, then they can move down to Latin America. The good thing is that when we have a supply chain through Latin America, almost all of that money comes back to the U.S. When we have a supply chain in China, almost all that money stays in China or goes elsewhere to fund their military. And so this is good for us. It's good for our hemisphere. And it kind of reverses that transfer of wealth from our middle class overseas.
Wow. So, Senator, really a common complaint is that we have pharmaceuticals, we have weapons, bullets that are made in China. And it sounds like this act aims to change that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, when we change that, when we keep jobs leaving the Western Hemisphere to go over to Asia, there's more jobs in the Western Hemisphere, and people are less likely to migrate from, say, Guatemala to the United States.
Yeah.
Our whole point is let's create prosperity in the Western Hemisphere, and then someone is less likely to move.
It's exactly what Trump did, try and bring all the business back that Joe Biden has been sending overseas, mainly the auto workers. Joe Biden has been a senator for 40 years, and his whole time he's been giving our jobs away.
Here and more likely to stay home. So it helps us economically, it helps us militarily, it also helps us at the border, and that's just the cherry on top.
Wow, that's very interesting. We were talking about China, the economy supporting the Western Hemisphere as a whole, and you're right. If companies that are in China right now go to a country in Latin America, you're talking about root causes, something that the vice president often tries to tackle.
Yeah, so if you look at Mexico, for example, since a lot of firms have built in Mexico, the kind of migration from Mexico has kind of evened out. Way back when, it was huge. Now it's evened out because there's jobs in Mexico. Now, by the way, we don't want good jobs to leave the United States to go anywhere else but the United States. But there's some jobs in which labor costs are in which the environmental regulation is such that it just cannot be here. Okay? And keep it in our hemisphere. Let's share the wealth with Americans, and let's put a kind of stop on immigration. But lastly, let's kind of give China less money to build up their military.
We need to be less dependent on China. The more that we can be less dependent on China, the better.
To undermine our interests, to do other things which is otherwise harm us.
It's fascinating, and I know this was a bipartisan effort. Several problems that you aim to tackle in this one bill, the Americas Act. I think that's something that you call all-encompassing. Senator Cassidy, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a great morning. Great day to you.
Thank you, Carly. You too.
I'm Steve Doocy.
All right, high-speed news. If you like it, like it. You like it a lot, subscribe. Till the next time, y'all have a good one. God bless.